Hi there, this is Wolfhound-Nine, and I'm starting a new series that's going to be looking at the best weapons available in each of the weapon classes for Battlefield 4. With each episode, I'm going to be picking out the best weapons and just going over them, what they excel at, what they are kind of weak at. Now, there's no particular god gun in Battlefield 4. Each weapon has its kind of area of expertise, and that seems to be true across all of the weapon classes, with few exceptions. So I'm going to point out the best guns for every single job, and I'll probably pick a favorite kind of general use gun that you might want to use if you don't know what you're going into. This episode isn't going to be dedicated to any kind of weapon reviews, though. This episode is purely to explain the statistics behind weapons and how they affect your playstyle. Now, most of the data I'm going to be using in this series is taken from Simthic. If you're not familiar with what Simthic is, it's a data website that basically has a bunch of stats on the weapons taken raw from the game files and presented in a more human readable format in graphs and charts and plots and the like. If you're curious, I'll make sure to put a link in the description and you can go check it out yourself. It's a really great site. The first key to understanding weapons in Battlefield 4 is to understand their damage. Damage in this game is done fairly straightforward. Weapons do their maximum damage up to a certain range, after which the damage starts to fall off fairly rapidly until it hits a minimum value. This damage can be modified by the part of the body you hit, though it's notable that this damage modifier isn't the same for every weapon. Some weapons, for example the MP412 Rex, experience a larger bonus for hitting the head, whereas other weapons, such as a shotgun using buckshot, don't experience any modifier for hitting the head. Whenever I'm talking about a weapon with a unique modifier, I'll make sure to let you know. However, for the most part, it's easy enough to remember that headshots on most weapons will do double damage, chest and arm shots will do standard damage, and stomach and leg shots will do slightly reduced damage. The next factor into understanding weapons is understanding the recoil, and recoil essentially has three major components. The first is vertical recoil, the second is horizontal recoil, and the third is the first shot multiplier. Now, you're probably familiar with recoil from personal experience, but understanding each of these mechanics can help you get an even better grasp of how a particular gun works. Vertical recoil is the most straightforward of these, and it's just how your gun climbs as you continue to fire it. It can be more or less intense, but it's usually fairly easy to compensate for by just dragging your mouse downwards. Horizontal recoil is a little more important as it's harder to compensate for, and as such will affect your aim more. It comes in two flavors, symmetrical and asymmetrical. Symmetrical horizontal recoil is the least worrisome as your weapon will mostly stay on target and you're only really going to have to compensate for the vertical recoil of the weapon. Asymmetrical horizontal recoil on the other hand can cause your weapon to pull either to the right or the left, and depending on how intense this is, it could throw your aim off fairly severely. The final aspect of recoil mechanics is the first shot modifier. This is just a value that gets applied to the recoil whenever you shoot the weapon for the first time in any given burst. This makes the weapon just kick a little more strongly. This value can be fairly low or fairly high depending on the weapon, and it can really affect how well the weapon does at range. The next subject to touch on is spread. Spread is an inherent level of inaccuracy in your gun that you can't compensate for like recoil. You're probably already familiar with it from looking at your reticle when you're running around. Spread is modified by three factors: whether or not you're moving, your stance, and whether or not you're aiming down the sights. Even though you can't compensate for spread, you can control it using good burst fire or tap fire techniques. This is because your weapon increases its spread every single bullet it fires, but giving it time to cool down will cause the spread modifier to go away and it will return to its base spread value. That said, certain weapons have exceptional hipfire spread, certain weapons have exceptional aim down the sight spread, and certain weapons have exceptional moving spread. You're just going to have to pay attention to each individual weapon to get an idea of what works best. Simthic's a good place to look this up. The final mechanic I'm going to talk about is the reload time. The reload time only has two components. That is, the reload time with a bullet in the chamber and the reload time without a bullet in the chamber. Generally you want to reload with a bullet in the chamber because it takes less time. This is basically when you reload when you still have ammunition in the gun. You could keep firing it if you wanted to. If you completely used up your magazine though, it'll take you a little longer to reload for the most part. I'll make sure to note whenever this is the case, and I'll make sure to also note extremely long reload times. It may not seem like a big factor, but having a short reload time does make a big difference. And that's my basic introduction to gun mechanics. If you're curious and you'd like to know more, I would encourage you to jump over to Simthic, but this should get you comfortable enough so that you understand what I'm talking about in the upcoming episodes. That said, I'm curious to know how you guys have been finding the weapons. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite gun is and why you've enjoyed it so much. If you found this helpful at all, maybe give it a like and a favorite, and I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves on Battlefield 4. Cheers!